So today I'm going to be talking about the Pixar film Coco. For any of you who've seen it, and if you haven't, that's fine. I'll explain kind of the important parts and how I'm going to connect it with what I'm going to be talking about theologically. So I'm connecting it to the issue of personhood in theology. So really, what I'm going to do is show how Coco can help us think about things like personhood, things like remembrance, things like participation in Christ. What I'm going to be presenting is basically what will be in an upcoming theological anthropology anthology that I was asked to contribute to. So I'm going to argue that Coco presses us toward a theological anthropology in which who we are is not defined by like isolation, individuality, sort of capacity, things like that, and even like things like basic guilt, sin, but by being remembered in love. That is, we're bound together in Christ, who is the firstborn among many siblings, the one who remembers us, and the one who refuses to let us be forgotten. And that's really what defines what it means to be a person. Okay, let's get started. It can be pretty tempting to romanticize family, especially if we've come from a stable or healthy one, right? Family systems theory reminds us that family cohesion often supports us into adulthood. Attachment theory adds the sort of bonds of trust, consistency, and reliability shape our confidence in the world. But families can also wound us very deeply. I think Coco captures kind of both sides of how families shape us: the deep warmth of belonging, and also the pain of family rules that can crush kind of individual aspirations. Now, in the movie Coco, Miguel's family, Miguel, who's the main character in this, who's a young Mexican boy. So his family, the Riveras, have forbidden music in their home. Their matriarch Imelda banished it basically generations ago, and that prohibition still governs the household in the movie. When Miguel dreams of becoming a musician, he finds himself at odds with the very people who love him. That's not unlike many of our experiences too, where family really becomes both the place of belonging and also a place where we kind of feel the most misunderstood. Right? So Coco, let's kind of recall the story if you've seen the movie, and I'm just going to give you enough to kind of understand how I'm making connections here. So on Dia de los Muertos, which is Day of the Dead, families build ofrendas, which are basically altars decorated with flowers, like the marigolds that you can see behind me, candles, food, and photos of departed loved ones. These are acts of remembrance and also welcoming deceased relatives kind of back into the space where they can come see their eat their favorite food, spend time with their relatives who are still alive. But these are acts really of remembrance. To be remembered is to still belong. That's kind of the idea here. So during the Day of the Dead, in the movie, the main character, Miguel, discovers that his great-great-grandfather might be the famous but deceased musician Ernesto de la Cruz. Obviously, he would be deceased, great-great-grandfather. Convinced that music is in his blood, Miguel steals Ernesto's guitar and finds himself transported into the land of the dead. And when he gets there, he crosses this bridge over to the land of the dead, he meets Hector, who's kind of a trickster skeleton, who's desperate to be remembered by his yet unnamed daughter. And Hector is actually kind of on the verge of what they call the final death, from the land of the dead to who knows where, once you're forgotten. It's a complete erasure when no one in the land of the living remembers you. You cease to exist. Now, the climax of the movie, just spoilers, Miguel sings the song, which is one of Ernesto de la Cruz's supposed songs that was actually written by Hector, who turns out to be the one who actually is Miguel's great-great-grandfather, and the father of Coco, who's his great-grandmother. So he sings "Remember Me" to his great-grandmother, Coco. And she's dealing with dementia, clearly, in the movie. And this singing to her father's song, which he wrote about her memory returns. And Hector's picture is pulled out of a drawer next to her and is placed on the ofrenda, the family altar. So in that scene, in the final scene, what ends up happening is because Hector's photo has been returned, he can now be remembered by his family and come back during Dia de los Muertos from the land of the dead to visit his family each year in the land of the living. So the final scene, the Riveras, both living and dead from generations past, are reconciled in song, memory, and love. And it's a powerful message. Identity is not found sort of standing in isolation, but by being remembered and bound together in love across generations. Now, why does this matter theologically? You can probably sense where I'm going a little bit. Much of Western theology starts with a picture of the human person in its theological anthropology as an isolated, rational, self-interested individual. In this view, the individual recognizes that there's a divine being of some sort that has a law, but they realize that they failed, can't do it, and come under God's judgment. The whole relationship begins with a no from God. God in this picture is like a stern, authoritarian father. Human beings are fundamentally perverse and rebellious, deserving wrath, and additionally, they are contradictory selves in this weird way, both having the capacity to understand God correctly and to do what he asks, but also the basic incapacity to fulfill it in any way. At best, they can be saved if they accept the right transaction, faith in Christ. You've heard the story a lot. You've heard me hammer on about that a lot. This problem is not just theological, though, although it is. Historically, this framework of capacity and incapacity, what it ends up doing is it becomes racialized and weaponized. So instead of a single self sort of having both capacity and incapacity, you start judging certain people and bodies on a continuum from incapacity to capacity. Okay. So Willie James Jennings shows how the formation of the racial world essentially mapped capacity and incapacity onto other bodies. Right? Europeans imagined themselves as more capable than other humans, so capacity, right? While others were cast out as deficient, depraved, and closer to death, so incapacity, right? This distorted vision of God would fuel colonialism, really, domination, and all sorts of exclusionary activity. So this modern Western story doesn't just tell a bad story about God, it also enables violence against those in subjugation against those outside of the circle of capacity. So it's both anthropologically and theologically deformed way of thinking about things. So what's an alternative account to this, right? I suggest that a vision of participation in Christ is the way to go. Instead of starting off the individual, trying to reach up to the divine, it begins with God's self-revelation, what Paul calls an apocalypsis, an apocalypse, this channel is named after. It's an unveiling in Jesus Christ, and it's a gathering up of people into that event of disclosure. So in him, in Christ, God doesn't say no up front, but an unshakable yes. Paul describes Christ as the firstborn among many siblings. You forget this. He's not a distant sovereign, sort of standing up above us. He's the Lord, but he's also our older brother. He's family, okay? This should tell us something about what it really means to be a person. Personhood is not about moral capacity or incapacity. It's about belonging in Christ, who is both the Lord and our older brother and friend with whom we are tied up with fundamentally in love. So this chapter for the book, I actually end up sketching kind of what I call 3 family gatherings to gesture toward what this vision of theological anthropology of participation in Christ can look like kind of in the world. So the first one would be food, care, and struggle. Personhood is discovered quite literally through sharing meals, sharing stories, storytelling, solidarity with each other. And these aren't just sort of trivial customs. They testify to the divine economy of memory and joy with each other, of being woven together in community. Second one would be solidarity under power. This can be defined in various ways. Our humanity is revealed, and who we are as persons is revealed in those when we endure and resist empire's kind of crushing weight, or the powers and principalities crushing weight on us. Communal protest, laughter, and survival are themselves theological acts within this. within this participation in Christ. So as Romans 8 will say, nothing can actually separate us from the love of God in Christ, not death, not rulers, right? Not powers, nothing like that can. So it's holding on in solidarity to that hope against powerful. And then third, God's memory. This is the deepest ground for our personhood. Our memory falters, right? We forget through distance, ill, and just the passing of time, right? God never forgets. As John Swinton puts it, our personhood is secure not because we remember ourselves or being remembered by other people necessarily, although these are important things, but because God remembers us into being. Think about that for a little bit. God remembers us into being. That's why there is no final death, okay, for anybody. In reality, God's memory is infinite, which is why you can say God remembers us into being. It goes beyond sort of temporal categories. God's memory is infinite, it's loving, and it's unshakable. Now, this perspective resonates strongly with what Coco's about. Think about Mama Coco, right? She has dementia. Her memory's fading, and it's nearly gone. But the film insists that memory by others, being remembered by them, can restore identity, right? For Christians, we're going to go a step further than this, however important it is to actually grasp, but we do step further past this. Even when human memory fails completely, we're still remembered eternally by Jesus, okay? This transforms our practices of remembrance then now. Ofrendas, songs, memorials, shared meals, all become signs and pointers to a deeper reality, that God's memory holds every life, every name, every story, even when our memory fails. It also is going to reshape our ethics, how we actually live and act in the world. If personhood is secured by God's memory, then no one is disposable. No one's forgotten. That means that our task is to live in ways that echo this remembrance of God, honoring, naming, and lifting up those the world tries to erase and tries to force us to forget. Okay. So what do we learn from Coco and from Paul's gospel? Kind of together. That to be human is not to be isolated, condemned, or measured by capacity or incapacity. It's to be remembered in love. The gospel promises that in Christ we are bound together as a family, you know, with all the beauty and hardships that come along with that, right? The final song in the movie, Coco, that Miguel sings captures this pretty beautifully. He says, "I mi familia, oiga mi gente, our love for each other will live on forever in every beat of my proud corazon," or heart. This is more than Miguel's song, as you can see. It's the gospel song as well. It is Christ's song to us, the one who gathers the living and the dead, who binds us together and sings us to new life, right? We're forever in God's proud heart for us. So even when our memories falter, even when our families wound us, even when powers and principalities try to erase us, we are still known, still remembered, and still held. That is our personhood, I would argue. That is our hope, and that's our participation in Christ. And with that, this has been Apocalypse Here, Christianity you can live with.